let's just be organized. Let's not do everything at the last minute. So let's work smarter. Let's find the best way to work smarter. And that may be AI, but there's also other things we need to take into consideration. So ethics, compliance, all those things need to be taken into consideration to work smarter.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success.
Nick Leighton is an amazing person who I've met recently, and might I say, I'm so impressed by you, Nick. And I love the sign that you have. For those of you who are watching this episode instead of just listening to it, you have your book cover, and you also have a great sign that says exactly where you want to be. So that is the moment. That is where we all should be and where we should all be living. You've done so many different things. You continue to pour into a lot of engaging and interesting areas. So as we start this conversation, I'd just love for you to talk a little bit about your background. What got you intrigued and interested and engaged in being an agency owner, being a consultant, of course, and then we'll get into the world of AI and.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about.
Yes, always.
Let me go with background. Okay, so my background was I came out of a degree on psychology of human communication, which is kind of unusual for a degree, but it was before there were communication degrees even out there. I'm like, well, what do I do with this? And then I thought, well, actually, let's just carry on education. That sounds good. So I went and did an MBA. So then I came out of college, obviously grossly overqualified and underexperienced to do anything, but ended up with a very small business, which was a lot of fun, doing all their marketing and all their sales. That was a recycling company, and that was fun. But then I got headhunted to work for a large tech company looking after their marketing. It's a long story, but the job that they offered, what they thought they were recruiting for, was marketing manager, in the United Kingdom, looking up at the UK. But when I turned up for the job, because I wasn't really looking, I said, what jobs have you got? And they said, well, we've got marketing manager based in the UK. We've also got marketing manager for Eastern Europe and the Middle East. I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. That's the one I'm interested in. And they said, well, that's interesting. We haven't actually met anyone for that job yet. So I'm like, oh, well. What do you know? Having never been to Eastern Europe or the Middle East, I thought this was a great idea. For some reason, after several interviews, they thought it was a great idea. So I kind of started my serious career working for a large tech company, looking after Eastern Europe and the Middle East for a multi-million-dollar company, which soon became a billion-dollar company. So that's fun.
Amazing. And obviously, you're now in the United States. Was that with the same company? What was that transition like?
Okay, so yeah, there was a couple of steps along the way. So when I started working for that tech company, they moved me to Paris until I pointed out to them that Paris was not in Eastern Europe or the Middle East. You should go to the market. And they said, sure, where do you want to go? I said, let's go to Prague. And they were right, okay, sure. So I went to Prague. I lived in Eastern Europe. I went in and out of Eastern Europe and the Middle East, different countries, did the marketing job. And then I realized that I could find great agencies in Eastern Europe and not so much in the Middle East. And we're talking about, mid-1990s, end of the 1990s. So I went to my boss and said, I think I should move to the Middle East. And she said to me, do you speak Turkish? I'm like, no, I kind of meant the Arabic Middle East. She said, okay. Do we have an office there? I said, yes. You're born in Dubai. She said, okay, go to Dubai. So I moved to Dubai. And that worked out nicely because I could get agencies and people to work for me in Eastern Europe, but I had to do the work myself in the Middle East. So carry on doing that. And then after a few more years, they wanted to move me back to Paris. I didn't really want to move from Dubai. It was kind of happening. So I called up 5 of my closest friends. They were all marketing managers for other technology companies. Hey, I'm going to start this agency. Yeah, let's call it PR. Would you use it? And they said, sure. So I started the next day with 5 blue chip clients, all from the tech industry. And I grew my agency from 1999. And that went through some iterations. And I sold it at one stage. And at that point, I moved to Southern California, which seemed like a good idea at the time.
I love that there's intentionality, but there's also happenstance in this whole experience that you've had. What would you say are some of the commonalities between marketing and PR in Eastern Europe, right, in the Middle East, versus in the United States and other global markets?
Actually, there's more differences than there are similarities, but ultimately your strategy and that process you come up with your strategy, that's going to be the same. Doesn't matter what region you're in. Everyone says, oh yeah, I work in this region. It's so different from everywhere else. Yeah, but that's tactical level. So you go through the strategy. You got to understand what your messaging is, who you're targeting. So that's always the same. Doesn't matter where it's going to be. You're going to use different tactics because they work differently in different markets. One of the main differences when we do a lot of work, like continue to own an agency in the Middle East on this at this time, is that everything we do is bilingual, English and Arabic. So you don't often get that in many jobs around the world. So yeah, working fully bilingual has its opportunities and its challenges as well. I think Dubai is a particularly interesting place of the UAE because we have different groups of people. There's a lot of expatriates. So 90% of the population come from other countries. So they come to the market, whether that's business to business, business to consumer, with different backgrounds, different understandings. So you can't just blanket market something. You've got to take each of these little groups and talk to them in a slightly different way. And that's what I find quite fascinating in that market.
Yeah, and it's curious to me. I think I hear maybe perhaps more on the consumer product side of things, that a lot of companies are trying to create a more global strategy that, of course, they can personalize per market, but that way they can go out with one message. And this is more, of course, you're thinking candy bars, you're thinking products like that versus tech companies. And so what you're really expressing is that, yes, the basic strategies that we all know are the same, but then how you implement them has to be really honed in to that demographic.
Right. And that demographic is quite complex in other countries. I'm not saying it's not complex in the US market. Domestic market definitely has interesting nuances to it. But every country has its different nuances. So to give you an example, we just launched a consumer tech product. And the intention was that this was going to be for the Arabic-speaking population. Oh. It turns out after 3 months that actually it's really the bilingual speaking population that prefer this product. So things has changed, but that's all part of everyday marketing. You listen to the market, take feedback, and then you pivot as you need to.
Yeah, and then Southern California, was that just because? Was it there was an opportunity there that you saw as well?
Okay, the reality is, I went to a entrepreneurial event which was in Los Angeles in the Playboy Mansion, New Hampton's Playboy Mansion, which was back then, and at that event I met my now wife. So that was 20 years ago. So that's the real reason I got song.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that, but it was perfect time to bring it up. So let's now get into, what does your day-to-day look like today? You had sold your agency. You eventually started it again or bought it back, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it came back to me. So the agency that purchased our agency in the Middle East was expanding and purchased multiple agencies. And during an economic downturn, they decided they couldn't make it work. So they withdrew out of the Middle East market, which allowed me to go back in. And because I hadn't sold them my brand, I still had good connections there. I started up again. Yeah, so we still had the agency there, which is great. When I started up again, it was a negotiation with my wife from the Playboy Mansion. And they said, right, we're going to go back to Dubai. I'm going to be just up. She's like, yeah, so quick. We have kids now. I don't think you should be going backwards and forwards. I said, well, what if I could just do this all remote? And she's like, well, good luck. Now, we're talking pre-2020, so before I was working remote. So she thought that's completely crazy. Obviously, that began to go a little slowly, but then since 2020, it mushroomed and no one really cares where you are. So I do a full team in the Middle East. I actually have a team outside of the Middle East as well, but we have people that are fully bilingual. We do a lot of the campaigns, and then we have an international workforce that are in Asia, also in the US. So my day typically is early in the morning. So this morning at 6 o'clock, I was on a call with my teams, but also with a client based in Dubai. And between 6 and 8, I'll probably be doing calls with my team or with clients who are based there. And then in our Pacific time during the main part of the day, there may be some catch up to do from the Middle East, but normally I'm actually coaching owners of other agencies during that time. And then in the evening, I'll check back in with my team. But this works really well because most people who run businesses, so any entrepreneurs out there will probably get this, is we're complete control freaks. No, we can do it better than anyone else. That's why we have a business. And this allows me to let go because as I sleep, the team actually do that work. And they're like, Nick, don't bother us. We're just going to get it done. It works out very nicely for everyone.
And you have a lot of trust, and you had to build that trust and find the right people to build your team out.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But the reality is that most people can be trusted. If they're going to be on a team for 3-6 months, there's going to be trust then. And if there isn't trust, they'll leave anyway. So I bet most people start from a position wanting to do good, wanting to do better. So can we just put them in that right role that they're going to really thrive? The difference being is that we only will hire people who are self-starters who don't need to be managed. So A lot of people on the team are very, very good at working things out themselves. And that's definitely a skill, which I'm probably would say is everywhere now. I mean, since COVID and people are working remote, there's not so much oversight for a lot of people. So you have to be self-starters. So nothing crazy there, but that's certainly how we recruit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that also means a certain level of experience, not just job experience, but life experience, maturity.
Right. And maybe that's a good segue into how we use AI and all the tools out there, because we prefer to hire and recruit people who have life experiences that are experienced in the workplace, because we can often use the tools and the technology that we invest in to allow them to understand the markets, to understand what we do as far as work in the public relations, the marketing realm. So we always look for people with 10 or 15 years of public relations experience, although relationships is very vital in what we do. So a lot of our team have good experiences, but we can teach them and we can support them with the technology around.
Yeah, fantastic. And I do want to talk about AI, but I also want to talk about, you mentioned that you spend a lot of time during the day coaching other owners. So you talk a little bit about that and what made you decide that, oh, this is something I really need. I have a lot of experience working all over the world in this field. I see a need for other people to help them perform and achieve the best that they can be.
Sure. So that happened as I sold the agency. So at that time, I was looking for guidance around me to work out what I was going to be doing next. And I was trying to find the right coach, the kind of masterminds, the boards, if you like, of people around me. And I stumbled across a franchise, which I thought, well, this is great, but they didn't have anyone in our region where I was in California. So I kind of inquired, and that led to me going down that route of purchasing that franchise, which was general coaching. Now, over time, I've left that franchise and I specialize and don't make it just general any business owner as they're set up, but now just do marketing agency owners. And the reason is simple. I would go and I would consult or offer my coaching for maybe a metal fabrication company or an engineering company. And while these were all great businesses and I love what I was doing, I really understood every time I went to a marketing agency, I had such specialized knowledge and vernacular we used between us. It was just so much more valuable. So that's what I specialize now, just working in that marketing agency world, whether it's an SEO company, a videography company, digital marketing, advertising agency, PR agency, anything like that, because we talk the same language. We know from the beginning. So there's a lot of shortcuts we can make. And that's what makes that kind of coaching very efficient for someone who's getting coached. And I highly recommend whatever industry someone's in, if they're looking for a coach, to go with someone who's worked in that industry. You're going to get to the answers quicker.
Yeah, fantastic. Are there a lot of commonalities between the people who come to you for specialized coaching?
Absolutely. Maybe on a scale, there are some of the people who are relatively new. 3 years in the industry, they've got it going, they've got their first clients. Now they're looking for freedom. I'm working all the time. I thought it was going to be different. How do I scale this? And then I also work with people who have been in business for 10 to 20 years, and they've got a larger team that are around them. And again, they're working too hard. They're like, I need freedom. How come my people aren't doing this? How come I seem to be pulled into the work still? So same thing is that all these people are working in the business. They're not working on the business, but they're either trying to grow it and like, how do we expand this? Well, they're like, why are there so many people and why they're not doing it? So there's both those elements. People are looking for freedom. They want a system around them so they're not stressed. They want to be able to let go, but they need transparency to do that. And they need good teams around them. And they just, they want to look after clients. Everyone I work with wants to look after clients. They want the best for their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why they stay in the business. And I wish that I had met you a couple of years ago when I was going into different agencies in the Southern California area where they were trying to go through the same transition, perhaps, maybe transition out of working all the time, bringing in new people, but also finding that their clients were so used to working with them in these smaller agencies that it was hard to make that transition. And it would have been probably great to have some guidance on how you can step away from being in the business so much.
Right. Yeah. It's hard. You're going to want to do that. And so, of course, there are some people who want to move away from their businesses. They need some kind of contingency that either they want to pass on to the people in their company or to a family member, or they just get out of it completely. There's a lot of options like that people are looking for as well.
Yeah. And this takes us to exactly where you want to be, right? And where you have a book, you're a motivational speaker. So can you talk a little bit about the experience of creating the book and then turning that into speaking beyond coaching?
Sure. So let's go back to why the book exists.
Yeah.
So back in the time when I had the agency in the Middle East, first time around, and we did mainly technology clients, but we would always have a pro bono client that we were working with, always someone with charity that was a good aim. That kept our team very honest and open to new ideas. And at the time, we were looking after the United Nations World Food Program. So that's one of the largest charities in the world. And their challenge was that in that Middle East region, which was quite a large region for them, it went up into Pakistan and down to Africa. They had a lot of aid that they need to give, and there's a lot of money there, but they weren't getting the donations. So they're like, how do we market this charity and how do we show all the good we're doing so we can get more money coming in? And what we did was, and a number of times, is we would take journalists from around the world and we would take them to where aid was being given and show them all the good work that was going. And so we did this once when we were in Pakistan, and our model was quite simple. We take 15 to 20 journalists from anywhere in the world. We fly them into where there was large infrastructure, normally a major city. And in this case, it was Karachi. And we would show them all the governments and presidents or prime ministers. We'd have very high connections. So we get to the leaders of the country. We let the leaders talk about what they were in their country. And then on day 2, we'd take to show them where the aid was giving. And normally we were seeing kids who were starving, things like that, because it was about food. So we went into Pakistan and we showed them these big government people, and they got to meet the leaders of the country. Second day, we got out onto a United Nations helicopter. We flew into the Kashmir region. So that's that area kind of bordering India and Pakistan.
Yep.
And that's where some earthquake had been. So a lot of aid was there. And we got hijacked. Basically, our helicopter was not allowed to go where we wanted to go, and we were forced to land at gunpoint. And we didn't realize at the time, but this was really government aid being shown to the journalists. They knew the journalists were there. They wanted to show their aid they were given. So I don't believe at the top we were really in mortal danger, but we certainly weren't on our planned trajectory for the day. And so I realized as we were forced to land in this field surrounded by people with machine guns, that this seemed like a really dangerous situation to be in, but it was exactly where I wanted to be. I was working, doing the job I loved doing. I was traveling, which I loved traveling, and I was giving aid. All these 3 elements look great. I'm like, seems like I shouldn't be here right now, but it is exactly where I want to be. And that was the genesis of the book. So the book then takes that idea of, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, what do you really want? Where do you want to be? And how do we build a business around that? There's a strategy and then there's a day-to-day. The whole idea behind that is identifying what your champagne moment is. So if I asked you what's the one thing you want to do personally in the next 2 years, and that the answer could be anything, but it has to be personal. It's not make another $1 million. It's not revenue driven. It's not, I want to get to 20 employees. Nothing like that, personally. So it could be, I want to go to the opening of the Olympic Games. I want to build a house in the city that I came from. It could be anything along those lines. Never visit Disneyland, whatever it might be. I want to go to World Cup. I want to go to Super Bowl, whatever. That's a personal reason. And then what we do is we build on that personalism and we build that business around it to allow you to achieve things in a personal way.
Amazing. Which is what you would think would be the construct, right? Is not having this out of whack. Balance isn't even the right word because I don't think you ever have balance, but where you're just working and working and working, but then you realize that life has passed you by.
Right. And honestly, I think that COVID reset us.
Yeah.
I definitely think that the younger generations were often accused by the older generations for wanting more, not just going to work 7, 8 hours a day, but maybe they had it right. Maybe mental health is more important. Maybe sleep is more important. Maybe how they live their life is more important. And I'm not saying you shouldn't work hard, but it's not a balance. It's an integration today.
Integration.
So let's work that out.
Yeah, fantastic. You're also an adjunct professor. So you do wear many hats. You have different organizations and businesses. What are some things that you do to make sure that you are integrating all of these along with your family and the other goals that you have?
Well, I think communication is probably a key to that. So I communicate a lot. I'm married for 20 years. So, if I coming up to work out if I'm going to be teaching the next semester, that's a conversation. And most people would think that getting to the next level or doing the next thing is important. But yeah, if it means that my wife says, you know what, kind of like hanging out with you on Monday evenings. So I don't really want you teaching on Monday evenings. Then we have to make changes. So that's always a balance when you live with someone else and when you have kids as well. So, but it changes. I mean, especially when you have kids, they come to development ages where you need different things. At one stage you're just carrying around in a car. Other times you just need to be there to support them. And then eventually you get this empty nest situation as well. So things change from year to year. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in that, my daughter's a junior in high school. We're looking at universities, mostly overseas, because that's what she wants to do. Also getting her to the point where she can drive. So all of these things, and seeing that, well, this is only a small moment in time that I have, and then she'll be gone. And then there will be other things that I do or have time for, I can reposition. So absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As long as you can open yourself to the change, and with kids, you have to do that. But there's so much change right now. I think, I don't know, does it make me sound old if I say this? Things are changing quicker? I think I really think the technology has moved us. And again, I think something like COVID really pushed us to move as far as technology and a number of other things. So open to the change, I think, is a vital element for careers and for people and their own well-being.
Yeah. And you're of course, you're ahead of the technological game before everybody had to pivot. We see this a lot with mainstream American businesses, right? There are a lot of mom and pops that still might not even be fully digitized. And they were not prepared to be digitized during COVID because the roadmap had been in about 7 years. So, and now we're there, right? We're trying to get everybody up. Now we have AI, Gen AI. I mean, we've had AI, but the Gen, right? And we're trying to make sure businesses know how to incorporate different systems, not just on the marketing side, the PR side, but also the business systems and processes that they're using. What are some ways that you, as an agency owner and in everything else that you do, have embraced AI? You mentioned a little bit with your employees and how that can help get them up to speed. But what are some ways that you embrace it, that you utilize it, and that you see other people who are entrepreneurs or small businesses should?
Sure. I think there's a lot of opportunities here. So this is a great question. So if you haven't started using AI, don't worry. You haven't missed the train. The train is barely out of the station, really. The reality is that pre-2020, November 2020, when ChatGPT came on the scene, there was AI out there. And yes, as an agency, we were using it. We were trying to use it to generate content, written content. It wasn't great. So ChatGPT pushed us all into this. Fantastic. Okay. So some people embraced that quickly. Some people didn't. But there is, I'd say, 3 areas here. There's artificial intelligence. Okay, we can learn about that. We can work with that. Then there's Gen AI. So we're generating things. The third area which I'm seeing people are really getting the most efficiencies from is the automation with artificial intelligence. So yes, Gen AI will produce words, images, music for you. That's great. And you should know how to use that. But I think as any business owner or any entrepreneur, really important that they understand how to automate things and make things more efficient within their business. So let's give an example. So if we're on a Zoom call together in our agency, we will be recording that. So we'll use a system. Doesn't matter what system you use. Doesn't matter if you're on Zoom or if you're on Teams or whatever, but there are always systems to record it. We happen to use one which is called Fathom. It's not an advert for them. It just seems to work for us. Fathom will then give us written notes from the meeting. It'll give us a summary. It'll give us what the actual items are. So now, better than any of my team has ever been able to do before, we can, within minutes of the meeting, send notes back to a client. That's useful. However, with automation, those notes could be sent into our project management system. Again, don't care what you use, if you use Rike or Monday or Trello, it doesn't matter what system you use. It could be automated. So now, within our project management system, for our client, we know what the next items are. Now we can use our project management system and the artificial intelligence within that to send out emails at the beginning of the week saying, we're going to be working on this. And at the end of the week, we work on this. So this is complete, this isn't complete. All these things are completely automated. And you learn a little bit of artificial intelligence in each of those things. But it has allowed greater efficiencies in our agency. That's one example. So I think what people need to keep in mind while thinking about artificial intelligence is AI up till now has been a platform. You can go into ChatGPT as a platform. You can use it for various things. It's going to be more and more a feature within other systems you're using. So learn both. Learn how to use things like ChatGPT as a platform, but also look at all the systems you have already invested in and see what the AI capabilities are within them so you can make the most of them.
Yeah. Fantastic. And am I correct that you have a book about AI coming out?
I am working on a watch this space hopefully by the end of this year, although I hate putting titles on books because it's really hard to do. AI and how to use it in the agency space is coming hopefully by the end of this year.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think that's going to be immensely helpful for so many people. As a professor, I encourage my students to use AI tools and to learn how to use in the Gen AI space, but then I will also talk about, other areas as well for automations and different things, because a lot of them do work for agencies or they work in entertainment, or they want to start their own, businesses. And so these are all things that are really helpful to them, not to mention the whole world of people who are listening to this episode right now who have small businesses or are starting them. I know there's some things I'm not supposed to ask you about. I don't know how much we can get into them, such as I
think we're running out of time. Are we? Goodness.
Your first business at boarding school, acting, being chased in Prague.
Yeah, all these things probably we shouldn't be talking about or. So my first business was, I went to boarding school. So if you can imagine what Harry Potter is like that's what our school. We didn't have moving staircases, but it was very, very similar. So I learned to live with a bunch of single gender, so it was boys, everyone, from the age of 11. So that kind of changes your perspective on a lot of things. But my first business was then when I was a little bit older than 11. And my mother was sending me Playboy magazines that I'd resell them. So resale business is a great business. So there you go. That's why we can talk about it. Right.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. Are any of these stories in your book?
Yep. Yeah. Some of the stories you will find in Exactly Where You Want to Be, Business Owners Guide to Broker and Happiness. So the full story about being hijacked, actually more details on how I met my wife at the Playboy Mansion. If I was looking for a wife, that's a very good place to go. Or it would be if it's still there, I guess it is. Look for all options. But yeah, you'll find some of those stories in that.
Yeah. We've spoken about so many topics that are all of really great interest. And I think, we're at the end of the year. People need to start thinking about, if they haven't already, where they're going to take their business next year, what their champagne moment is going to be, what they need for tools, what they need to invest in. So I think this is coming at the perfect time. What is one thing that you'd really love to impart on the audience today?
Okay, I think you just touched on it. I think planning is part of it. If you can work out what your champagne moment is, the one thing you want to do in the next 2 years personally, that will drive you. And if you are planning for the next year, or even if you listen to this later on in a few months and you want to plan for the rest of the year, there'll be contacts. Reach out to us. We have a free sheet, 7 simple questions to think about for your own business. Completely free. Take it, use it. That's the quick way of planning for next year. 7 questions. That's all it takes. But if you can plan, you can put in some guidelines, some rails. I don't want to use the word goals because I'm not a goal person. But if you had someone who could hold you accountable moving forward, then you will do a wonder for your business or for a department if you work with a department. Whether you want to be on your own or you want to work for a larger organization, having a roadmap and then being held accountable, that's what it takes.
Yeah, fantastic. So many more questions. We'll have to revisit this conversation another time when we have more time. But Nick, I'd love to ask, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, motto, words that help either you, your family, or your team thrive every day?
Every day we say the same thing in the agency. Work smarter, not harder. When I started in an agency, it was typical for an agency to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning, getting ready for the pitch the next day. And everyone who walks through our door, who's part of our team, are like, this will not happen. We're a cool, calm, organized agency. And that's what I really want to impart on everyone when I'm coaching with or any of the clients that we work with. It's like, let's just be organized. Let's not do everything at the last minute. So let's work smarter. Let's find the best way to work smarter. And that may be AI, but there's also other things we need to take into consideration. So ethics, compliance, all those things need to be taken into consideration to work smarter.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will lead everybody. We'll have your, of course, website in the show notes so everybody can find you, find the book, your resources, even learn more about your agency if they perhaps are looking for one. Thank you so much for being here and giving me some of your time. Always, always. I will look forward to our next conversation. And thank you to everybody who is getting some great advice from Nick Leighton today. learning a little bit more about how you should streamline and set forth who you are, where you want to be, and, bringing light into the world.
Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbandamplified.com.